wanted to get you on. Like I said, we've got a listener who said, hey, he's on the ballot here in Iowa. Like I said, I wanted you to tell people how they can write you in, where they can write you in, and other things like that. And just whatever you want to talk about, you're free to go wherever you want to go.
Okay. How much time do you have?
We got another 50 minutes if you want to.
Hey, David, I don't know if you know, but you're in Zoom, your thing says Travis Knight.
Yeah, that's my son. Who
okay, no, I know that, but I wasn't sure if you're broadcasting this.
Yeah. Okay, no. Okay, we'll come back. All right, welcome back, folks. And joining us now is Dr.SHIVA Ayyadurai. And we're about a week away. And I really, as I said earlier in the program, I really like what he is doing, because he is taking this thing that everybody is manic about, and he's using it to transcend this petty partisan contest, to get people to look at meaningful things that they can do in their life and other places. So the website, if I'm going by memory, is it Shiva for President, the number 4 for President? Is that correct?
Yeah, David, that's the site for coming to the campaign. But the other site that we invite people to get educated is shattertheswarm.com. Shattertheswarm.com, which is a site that really educates people how the few control the many. And then our larger movement, is truthfreedomhealth.com. ShivaForPresident.com is our campaign website. Shatter the Swarm is an educational website where in 15 minutes we explain to people this entire system dynamics of power, profit, control. And that leads them to the larger global movement for truthfreedomhealth.com. So those are the 3 sites. So it's a very methodical approach that we have to educate people.
And I like what you're doing. I think the best way that we can use this is to channel people into something that is above all of this. Let's talk just briefly, since we're a week away from the election. As I said, I've got a listener who said just check their ballot in Iowa and saw that you're on the ballot there. Talk about where you're on the ballot. Talk about what it takes to write you in, and which states you have qualified for being tallied in terms of a write-in.
Yeah, so first of all, David, to everyone listening, in the United States, we have something called the Electoral College. And in every state, you have to find electors, and the number of electors vary. And those electors have to go get signatures to get you on the ballot, even listed your name, or even as a write-in. It's not, it's very difficult to even be a write-in for a presidential campaign, so your votes are counted. So in California, to be listed, we had to get like 300,000 signatures, right? There's no way we could have done that. But we did get ourselves the ability to be a write-in candidate, which in itself is quite extraordinary. You have to get 108 electors, David, which we just finished, okay? So in every state in the United States, except for New Mexico, Nevada, Hawaii, and Alaska, at minimum, people can write in Dr. Shiva, Dr. Dr. Shiva, SHIVA. By law, the Supreme Court has ruled it is the intent of the voter. So if you don't if you can write in Shiva or Dr. Shiva, there's not any other Shivas running for president. So anything.
But they don't have to use your last name.
No, they don't have to. They can put Dr. Shiva.
Shiva is easy to remember. Yeah, Dr. Shiva or Shiva.
Right, because that is the intent of the voter. Every write-in vote gets kicked out of the machine, David, and it gets hand counted. So that's an advantage that we have. So that's a good thing, right? It gets hand counted. In 13 states, we actually got signatures to be listed on the ballot. So our names are supposed to appear on the ballot. Among them was Washington, Iowa, Idaho, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Kentucky, missing a few here. I think I said Minnesota, right? Tennessee, Nebraska, and a few others. There's about 13 of them. In those states, 6 of them took us off the ballot illegally, unconstitutionally, which are in litigation right now. So in those states, you can write us in. But in Washington State, you'll see our name. If you're in Massachusetts, you see our name, and you just circle in our name. That's easy. But in every state except those 4 states which don't allow write-ins, you can write in Dr. Shiva. So it's been a pretty extraordinary effort, David, with less than $100,000 that we created a national organization. We got on all of these ballots with electors, with leaders in 46 states, and we're listed in at minimum 7 to 8 states, and then the other 4 we're doing litigation. One of them is going all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The other is going to appellate courts. And we are challenging the entire process of ballot access end to end. And we just had a major win in Tennessee. Even the judge split the baby in half. The opposition said, oh, this case should be thrown out because, the election is only 4 days away. The case is moot. We printed the ballots. We argued that using a very, very important 1969 ruling. The judge gave us that win. Even though he dismissed it, which we're going to go up to the appellate court, he said this case is not moot because the constitutionality of ballot access can never be moot because the timelines are so short. So this is a huge win. Right. We've set a big precedent here saying that because from the time they try to throw you off the ballot illegally to the time you can file a lawsuit is only like 30 days.
Yeah,
so the Supreme Court in a very important case called forget his name, it's Ogilvy versus something else, ruled that ballot access issues are never moot. Anderson versus Calibris was one of them, John Anderson, where it got adjudicated 3 years later. So we're going to continue all these lawsuits long after the election, fighting for everyday people that we all have equal right access to the ballots. This is a big win. Kennedy only did one state, and then he ran away. He pocketed his 20 million and ran away. Okay. Richard.
That's amazing. But that is very, very key what you're doing in terms of fighting for ballot access as a principle. I said this with all of the back and forth about what happened in 2020. I said, you understand that the election is rigged from ballot access. I said, if you want to have honest elections, you got to start with ballot access. And then the second thing that you got to do is have debate access. If somebody makes it on the ballot, they need to be on the debate. But then you can talk about all the rest of the stuff. Then you can talk about the machines and the computers and paper ballots and how it's counted and all the rest of it. But you got to get it right at the very beginning with ballot access, and that's why what you're doing is really key. That ballot access fight, that's been one of the key means of controlling our election and shutting it down. Keeping people then out of the debate so that no serious issues are discussed. Those things are key.
Yeah, David, if you look at my credentials, which I have to promote because of all the shadow banning, right? And the influencers out there are all opportunists, right? But if you look at my credentials, educationally, business-wise, creating and fighting, standing up for the right things at the right time, since the time I was 17 years old, it's an A+++ record. Everyone knows, in 2020, I was the first one to call out the pandemic. I was the first one to run the Fire Fauci campaign. I was the first one to give people solutions on how to boost the immune system. I was the first one who exposed the machines and how the machines work, in bare view. I was the one in my federal lawsuit. I exposed the fact that the government has a backdoor portal into Twitter. All of these other people, Trump was promoting lockdowns. Effing Kennedy was promoting lockdowns. Jill Stein, as I called her, was promoting lockdowns and is also a Zionist. And people think she's not a Zionist. She was the one who threw Cynthia McKinney. And all you Green Party people, listen very carefully. The Green Party is a nouveau Democratic Party because now you have a Uniparty. And the establishment always has to have two heads, David. They have to have the obvious establishment, and then they have to have the not so obvious establishment. So real revolutionaries, real change agents like myself don't fill up that vacuum, right? They can't have that. So now that everyone is aware Trump and Harris or Democrats and Republicans are one, they have to create another scam opposing force. It was Booby Kennedy, but we exposed the hell out of him and he ran back to Trump. So now they created Jill Stein. And Jill Stein promotes the carbon tax scam. The entire Green Party is based on putting people on a new plantation.
Yes.
And the Democratic Party elites are the ones who are behind the Green Party. But it was Jill Stein who acts like she's for the Palestinian people, but she's the one who threw out Cynthia McKinney, who is a Black woman congressperson in Congress, who, by the way, has endorsed our campaign, and she said she'll be my Secretary of State. But Cynthia McKinney is the one who exposed AIPAC, and she was thrown out of Congress. She was the VP candidate with Jesse Ventura in the Green Party. When she came out and she said that perhaps 9/11 was done by Israel and Mossad, Jill Stein called her anti-Semitic and made sure she was banned from the Green Party. Jill Stein is a liberal Zionist. She just says just enough to fill in that vacuum. So the real discussion about Zionism doesn't take place, which is Zionism has occupied the United States of America. Zionism has taken over the Christian movement by equating, as though saying that if you're a Christian Zionist, that means Christian. I believe Jesus would have whipped all these Zionists, okay? Christian Zionism is an oxymoron. It's like saying you're Christian devil, Christian Satanism, right? That's how bad it is. So the reason I bring that up, David, we talked about ballot access. That's the front part of where the election fraud begins. The next part is, okay, you get on the ballot. Now they have to restrict you from getting visibility, which is the debates. Well, obviously the big guys are not going to keep me on, but even there's a new alternative debate organization called Free and Fair Elections. I fulfilled all the criteria to be on the debate stage, but they did not want me on the debate stage with Jill Stein and their libertarian guy, Oliver, who is polling at 0% here in Massachusetts. I'm at 1 to 1.5%. It's small, but I'm higher percentage polling, independent polling, and they don't want to put me on the debate stage. So even these alternative, quote unquote, fake anti-establishment organizations, which are coming against the Uniparty, are being created by the Uniparty to sucker people back so they don't build a bottoms-up movement. And that's what you and I have talked about, David. Our campaign is recognizes that people need to save themselves. That's our slogan. We've handed out.
And let me just jump in before we get into that. You know, when we talk about the debates, I was contacted by the people running the free and fair election debate before it happened to get it promoted. And I looked to see who was on it. It's like, well, that's not free. They didn't have Shiva on there. There's other people that were running for president that they didn't have on there either. And so, you know, it's like, I just, it really is a stickling point with me because I've been involved in third-party politics. I know how difficult it is to get on the ballot. And then they use the ballot as a determination as to who's going to get into the debates. And of course, they also throw in their polls, but then they can play all kinds of games with polls. And when we saw this, and when I was working with the libertarians in North Carolina years ago, what they would do is they would say, well, this is a private organization. And that particular time, it was North Carolina Broadcasters Association or something like that, that was running, it was the media that was running the debate. And they said, so since it's not being run by the government, we can exclude whoever we want. Now, what did that turn into? We saw, well, it's corporations, and corporations can censor anybody that they want to off of social media. It's the same template that they then later superimposed on social media. Well, these are private companies. They can do whatever. They're private companies who are working with the government, with those particular parties.
Yeah, but they
know exactly what they're doing.
They can outsource the censorship to private. They're laundering the censorship.
That's right. That's right.
In many ways, it's worse than it was before. Because at least before we had some ability for jurisprudence to go after the government. Now, when they outsource it to private companies, we don't have that.
That's right.
And that's what Missouri versus Biden, we should talk about it after your break, is so critical, because Missouri versus Biden was a really bad lawsuit done by a bunch of morons who purposely concealed the lawsuit win I got in Massachusetts. It was a conspiracy. It was a badly written lawsuit to create the conditions at the presidential level, so therefore justifying that government can in fact censor us using laundering censorship. And the people who did that lawsuit acted like they were heroes, but they intentionally concealed my lawsuit. Amy Coney Barrett said there is no direct connection showing that government censored you. My lawsuit is that lawsuit. They left it out. It was almost like these lawyers were colluding with the establishment to take it to the Supreme Court and fail purposely, David. Now it has made it very, very difficult for us to prove that government is the one who censored you. You say it's a horrible lawsuit done by a bunch of morons who intentionally left out my lawsuit, which had the evidence. And now I'm litigating that separately. But the bottom line is this, getting back to how the establishment works. They know that a bottoms-up movement is going to come with leaders like me, bottoms up. So they have to create fake leaders top down. One of the members of the Green Party called me up and he said, do you know Jill Stein? We were all sitting there. Suddenly, 7 people walk into a room and they anointed her to be the party head. Just anointed her. So back room is how all these people work. They never, ever want to have on the front transparent debates. I mean, I have more followers than Chase Oliver, like 10 times more polling at a higher rate than him. And he's promoted as a libertarian head when he was promoting the mask mandates. He's promoting the lockdowns, all of this. So the establishment knows there's going to be a bottoms-up movement, David. So they know people have figured out Trump and Harris. The people are not only waking up but getting out of bed. They don't want them to come to our movement. So they're creating these fictitious anti-establishment, aka Jill Stein, aka Libertarian Party. When these people are sold out people, and they're like the next wave. They're like the next Bernie Sanders.
Oh, the Libertarian Party lost me in 2020 when the candidate there had absolutely nothing to say. I mean, it was about the lockdowns and all the rest of the stuff.
Who was that?
That's Joe Jorgensen. And I knew Joe Jorgensen from 20 years earlier when she was running as VP for Harry Brown. I couldn't believe that they would take a powder and just not do anything when that lockdown was happening. That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. It's like, what is this about? You know, what are you guys doing? Is this so that you can get your name on TV or something? What game are you playing with this? And, you know, when we look at the Green Party, as you pointed out before, I've always called them the watermelons, because they got a thin veneer of green and inside they're all red, not meaning that they're supporting MAGA, but meaning that they're Marxist. All their policies are communist, about centralized control, about taking us into slavery. It is absolutely a communist agenda, but then they put that thin veneer of green on it.
Yeah, we should talk about that, David. You know, I just had a discussion with a friend of mine. He's an electrician, works very hard. And we're talking about this entire notion of state capitalism versus real capitalism and socialism. Okay. It's a very, very important discussion to have. So he was saying, you know, Amazon trucks on Sunday were delivering stuff to his home using UPS, United Postal Service. Okay. Which is a postal service that all of us contribute to our tax dollars. Okay. So what is, and then we had that discussion, so you can keep that over here. And then we're talking about Starlink. Starlink just got $2 billion Pentagon grant to build surveillance systems for us, for the government. So, and then you look at something like DHL and FedEx, privatization of the Postal Service. Now, I've spoken about this for many, many years, since 1997. It gets back to this core thing. The government over here has to live up to the Bill of Rights. And if the government censors you, if the government surveils you, you know, the warrantless wiretapping they did under the Bush administration, we have the right to sue the government. But if the government brings in a private party, gives them the contract to do mail, DHL, FedEx, to do satellites, to push their goods out, Amazon, guess what? We as citizens cannot sue. They've created a buffer to the government. Private companies have First Amendment rights. And this is the fascism that's taking place. This is state capitalism.
Yeah, now, it is fascism. And what they're doing is they're outsourcing the tyranny.
And I'm saying, you know, so when people use the word communism, or to describe, if the definition of communism is the government and private companies have become one, that's what China is. China is all the leaders of the private companies, and the government are in the party. So at least in China, you know they're fascist and they're state capitalism, which is the right term. It is nowhere near, if you read what Marx talked about, or the tenets of true socialism, and we should talk about that.
Yeah.
But they conflate that on purpose. Now, in the United States, we actually have state capitalism, but it's presented to us as democracy. And the more we outsource, the more the government outsources stuff to private companies and keeps this illusion, we actually have Chinese-like state capitalism. But at least in China, they know they're living under fascist state capitalism. In the United States, people think Elon Musk is some private entrepreneur. No, he's a government agent. He's a Mossad agent.
That's right. Yeah, it's a public-private partnerships. Whenever they talk about that, what you're talking about is a merger between the government and the you're talking about crony capitalism, and you're talking about corruption. And of course, the Chinese do it, and as you point out, they're open about it. But here, there's this subtle secrecy where they pretend that that's not really happening.
And if you look at every company Elon Musk has, all of them explosively grew at the behest of government.
That's right.
And so Twitter is like this with lock, stock, a stock barrel with government, right? Section 230 immunity. Without Section 230 immunity, Twitter would not be considered a platform. It would be considered a publisher. Their valuation drops by a factor of 10. So that's number one. So Twitter's value, why he was able to leverage Twitter to make his other wealth, right? Or use it to buy, is all comes from the behest of government. SpaceX, $7 to $10 billion. Subsidies. He didn't create any of these rockets. SpaceX is essentially ex-NASA engineers, ex-government engineers working in a private company under the illusion of privacy, a private company. But now they're building a surveillance system around the earth. And then you're going to pay for it. So, and keep going on, right? Same with the Postal Service. Amazon is using the Postal Service and making billions. So I would argue true, quote unquote, socialism, if you wanted to talk about that, where we, the working people, own this infrastructure again, because we paid for all this infrastructure. Now, the founders, when they created the Postal Service, knew there was certain infrastructure that is like air, like water. You know, we breathe it. So the Postal Service was a very interesting phenomenon, David. It was the bulwark to ensure the First Amendment took place. Yeah, the Second Amendment is important. But materially, the Postal Service was created to make sure that I could send you a letter, you could send me a letter, David, and no one would interfere. Free speech equal free reach. So the Postal Service, in their framework, also had their own independent police force. A lot of people don't know this. Separate from your state police, your local police, there is a postal police force. And that police force makes sure that postal employees, if they open a letter, 22-year sentence in prison. So you see, if I send you a letter and you believe it was open, we can sue the government and we can get restitution. Now, take that over to the world of email. If I send you an email on Gmail and Gmail opens it, you have no right at all.
That's right.
So all of this communications infrastructure got outsourced electronically, and even DHL and FedEx through this infrastructure. This is very, very important for people to understand. And I'm the only candidate who talks about this because I understand systems and I value these rights. So, and
that even goes back to, you know, we talk about the FISA court and all the rest of the stuff. That goes back to that because from its very inception, you had the CIA and the NSA were spying on Americans. And so the church committee hearing looked at this and said, well, you know, this shouldn't be allowed. But the Supreme Court had said, well, if it's AT&T, this government created monopoly, essentially, if AT&T has your information, they're a private company and they own that information. And so they can turn that over to the government if the government wants. And so we see that now propagating through where Bank of America, if they want to turn over everybody that had a transaction in Washington, D.C. around January the 6th, they can do that because that's their data. And so they have established, and this goes back now for about 60, 70 years, the idea that private companies own information about you and they can buy and sell you and they can turn you into the government.
Government is just a customer.
That's right.
This is what's happened. We have created a very sophisticated form of state capitalism. Fascism.
That's right.
Under the illusion of the Bill of Rights. So they've created this buffer. The government has created now a buffer so we can't go after them and make them accountable to the Bill of Rights, etc. This is what's dangerous, Dave, that's occurred. So when you play this out, this has become the modus operandi for everything. So how do we win at this? What is the solution? So what those in power have also done, they have conflated the words movements, working people's movements, with quote unquote communism to refer to that state capitalism. You see? So they really played a head game on people. Oh, you want to build a bottoms-up movement. Oh, that sounds communist. You see? So the right wing attacks it. The left wing has used these terms, right, to talk about.
They weaponize them. Yeah, they weaponize these terms. They even like they stole the term liberal. You know, they used to be people about freedom and everything.
So the left wing takes these very important terms about workers' movements and they take over them. The right wing uses them to attack, to brand it as quote unquote communist fascism. And if you really play this out, many of these important infrastructures that we have, like the Postal Service, should be public utilities for the public. You give a couple of choices. can use the Postal Service, or you can use FedEx or DHL. You can use Gmail, or you can use the government version. Now, why would that, not the government version, but the postal version, the people's version? Why would that be different? Because if the government opens your email, you can sue them. You can't sue if Gmail opens your email. You don't have any restitution at all. Mm-hmm. And the infrastructure that the founders created was a decentralized infrastructure when they created the Postal Service. So many years ago, David, I said that we should use mesh networks to have the people's network. Right now, when you talked about FISA, 4 major telco companies own all the communications. When warrantless wiretapping took place, government was wiretapping US citizens without any warrants. And then when they got caught in class action lawsuits, the Congress retroactively immunized them. You say they passed bills. Yeah. So this is the way that this is going on. You have private companies, government, aka Congress, and they're always protecting this state capitalism. That's what we have. So to me, this is why it becomes preeminent. We build a bottoms-up movement. So in my view, David, the telecommunication workers at AT&T and Verizon and all these people who actually do the work, that infrastructure at a certain point should be seized as a property of we the people. We're the ones who paid for that. The working people, not nationalization, that's state capitalism, but we working people say, you know what, this is my property. Get rid of all these executives. Because when you look at the cost of telecommunications, it should be like pennies by now. We have made, technology has made things actually very cheap. When you look at food, communications, it should actually be, the cost should be going down. But because of the nature of monopoly crony capitalism, they actually create artificial supply issues so they can keep the cost high. So this is very important. Actually, we can literally have quote unquote heaven on earth today. We have more than enough food. We have more than enough communication. I mean, we've created infinite capacity in some ways. But because of the nature of monopoly capitalism, imperialism, state capitalism, fascism, they actually create artificial supply issues so they can keep the cost high. And this is what's important to understand. So in my view, we must build a bottoms-up movement, and we, the people, must take back this infrastructure, which is our infrastructure. We paid for Starlink. We paid for this infrastructure, not the corporations. This is, in many ways, it's like the air, the water. This is public property. Yeah, you can have your private versions, great, but you better have a public version so we can hold government accountable. So the more and more, this is where the libertarian philosophy sort of falls apart, because they forget that the government and the private companies have become one. So, so anyway,
I remember when Gary Johnson was talking about it, and you know, it was one of these bakery cases, you know, in Colorado. And you got the guy who's now won multiple times at the Supreme Court, and they came in and said, well, we want you to make a custom cake for us that is, you know, antithetical to your religious beliefs. And I presumably, if he had made that cake, they would have taken his face and stuck it down in the cake, because that's what they were really trying to do. Yeah. And I remember Gary Johnson saying, well, the libertarian approach is that, yeah, certainly, you know, we don't want we don't want the phone company telling people that we don't like your sexual practices or your religious beliefs or whatever, so we're going to cut off your phone service. I said, well, no, actually, you know, he's not a public monopoly that's there. He's not part of the infrastructure. Exactly. There's other bakeries they could go to. And I said, the libertarian position on this ought to be that it would be abhorrent to have the phone company listening to your phone conversations and say, I don't like what you're saying, and then cut off your service. I said, that's what we're looking at everywhere. You know, when all this was happening with him, we also had the social media stuff was rolling out, and all the first cancellations were happening. It's like, why isn't the Libertarian Party aware of this? They really have lost their way in terms of you know, focusing on the Constitution and liberty.
Well, I remember Gary Johnson, his running mate was Bill Weld, drunken Bill Weld, who was a governor in Massachusetts, who's as elite as you can get. He lives on Fairweather Street in Cambridge, right? Yeah. As you know, as established.
They wanted to have 2 ex-governors, so it was very impressive, right? And they really didn't care what these guys believed, and they were neither one of them about liberty.
So David, I think the other thing I wanted to speak to is, you know, our campaign now. If you go to our social media you'll see the infinite amount of shadow banning that's going on. But separate from that, we're going direct to people. We probably put out close to 10 to 20 million of these cards you may have seen on our website. I don't know if you've seen those, David. I don't know if I can share here, but if you go to our website, shivaforpresident.com, they're little cards. And the card says, save yourself. And on the back of the card, it has cost of living going up a curve and lifespan going down, two inverse curves. And then it tells people go to shattertheswarm.com. So you can understand how we got here. That since 1970 till now, regardless of who you voted for, cost of living has gone up and lifespan is now going down. So the goal is to educate people that the quality of our leaders, the quality of the society that we get is a direct reflection of the decisions we make and our consciousness. And we have immense power to do this. So this is why I think these free and fair elections, pro-establishment people don't want guys like me on the debate stage.
Yeah,
they do not want that, because we're going to talk about this fundamental issue of breaking from all of this, giving the individual infinite power, in a sense, collectively and individually, to build these bottoms-up movements. So if you go to our screen right now, our ads, David, are individual of our leaders talking about, hey, there's a video, and these are the people just making the ads. The guy's out there putting Blacktop down, Matt Stoneman, and he's saying, hey, this is why I'm going to vote for Dr. Shiva. Okay? An electrician, a plumber, a school teacher. Those are our quote-unquote, multi-million-dollar ads, right? We actually have real people, David, making our videos and putting them out there, handing out cards. And
that's great.
The future is not going to be online for true opposition forces. The future is offline, because
I agree.
They have consolidated power. So whenever people ask me about Bitcoin, David, oh my God, Bitcoin's decentralized. No, it isn't. The infrastructure is all owned by 4 major telco companies. You need massive data centers. Yes, conceptually, a blockchain makes sense, but all the in-between infrastructure was owned by them.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and it is so funny, because all these other campaigns, they do produce multi-million-dollar ads, and they hire actors to act like they're everyday people. But you got everyday people just doing this on their own and putting it up. Talk a little bit about the swarm, and of course you have shattertheswarm.com, where people can get the full spiel about it. But just give people kind of an overview of why you call it the swarm rather than the deep state or something like that.
Yeah, David, what I want to really, everyone should go to shattertheswarm.com, watch it with your family. I'm not cursing in there. I'm pretty, in my suit and tie, and I'm the MIT professor in that model. Okay. So you'll enjoy it. Okay. It's a very, very Disney G-rated version, but it's very educational. But the swarm, the reason I call it the swarm is it's more about the concept of it's dispersed. The control is dispersed. When you use deep state or you use the swamp, it gives or the Rothschilds, right? Or you use XYZ, right? Or the Masons. It gives a location, like it's a particular group only, and it's localized to some geography or some particular group. And therefore it sets into people's mind, if we get rid of that group, it's over. The reality is a swarm, it comes from system science, is much more dispersed. They're everywhere. And if you ever see starlings, on a twilight flying, these birds that fly, they look like they're seemingly going in different directions. They may even compete, but overall they move together. They're a swarm, like a school of fish. You see that move together. So those in power are like that. That's a much more accurate description. They may have a Kamala Harris and a Trump, right? Acting like they're against each other. But overall, when it comes to the real questions of human existence, Zionism, right? They will come together. When it comes to the issues of manipulating 8 billion of us, they will come together. If there was a war where they're both killing each other, but they see us rising up, they'll get together and suppress us. And that happened during the, Franco-Prussian War. The French people were rising up. The French and the Germans got together, and they went back and beat up their own people and then went back to fighting. So we want to give this clarity to people that It's a multi-racial aristocracy dispersed all over the world, and they have a control system for their survival. Their goal is to maximize power, profit, control.
Yes.
So
and we saw that in 2020. Everybody's like, so who's directing all this? Is it Klaus Schwab? Is it Tedros? Who's directing? Well, they were all doing the same thing. They're moving like a bunch of starlings. They were all doing exactly the same thing at the same time. Right. And when I look at it, the way I think about it is autonomous killer robots and how they're talking about using them in this form. And that's really
form technology, David. So
yeah, that's right.
They have a telepathy. The work of E.O. Wilson talked about how ants work together. They look like they're doing random stuff, but they're actually communicating with 25 different chemical signals. The swarm has its own telepathic communication. They know who are their enemies, and then they have frenemies. Among them, okay, Trump and Harris may be local enemies. After January 6th, are all together again, right?
Yeah.
And then they go on, but during a period of time between around January every 4 years to October, they play out this WWE wrestling to entertain people. And that entertainment model comes from the Edward Bernays School of Advertising, which is we want to do sound bites to make the average electorate consumers of information and to be entertained. They do not want us to be participants. They do not want it to jump in the arena. So what is our movement, David? We're completely changing that. We're saying, you got to save yourself. Once you understand the swarm dynamics, the only way out of it is you. So I did an interview with some guy 2 days ago, and he was asking me just idiotic questions. Oh, what do you think about Trump? What do you think about Kamala? I said, look at all the questions you're asking. They have nothing to do with you. You're not asking anything about what am I going to do? As though these people overlord over us. And this is, so the swarm, when you go to Shatter the Swarm, I explain all of this with just a little marker and a chalkboard so everyone can follow it end to end, and you can rewind it and watch it. And then I explain that the swarm goal is to always make you think they're going to take care of things for you. Outsource your future to them, outsource your truth to them, outsource your freedom to them, outsource your health to them, that you don't have to take any personal responsibility. Oh, Booby Kennedy's going to do Make America Healthy Again. Really? I mean, this is a guy who said, I believe in full vaccination of all Americans. This is a guy who looks awful when you really look at him, has no sense of anything having to do with integrity. He openly tells you personal integrity and public integrity are two different things. Openly tells you that. He says the Palestinians are the most pampered people on the planet. So to the extent he talks about saving children by not putting food coloring here, he's absolutely fine bombing them over here. And they have these contradictions. So
I just covered yesterday a guy that was on social media, and he was talking about how his son, who died as an infant, sudden infant death syndrome from vaccines.
Yep.
And he said, I was really in denial about it, but now I trust RFK Jr. and he's explained it to me. And I trust that I'm voting for Trump because I know he's going to put RFK Jr. in there and he's going to fix it. And it's like, wow, this guy doesn't know what happened in the last 4 years ago when Trump got in. And he doesn't know what Bobby Kennedy has been doing with all this stuff. It's absolutely insane.
Does he not know Booby fucking Kennedy? Excuse me, effing Kennedy promoted. Sorry about that. Bleep that. Booby effing Kennedy. I mean, I really despise these people. They're devils, pure devils. Promoted lockdowns in March of 2020. He said it would save the climate. So you have to go back. And you have to look at what did these so-called leaders do when it mattered and compare them to what I did, David, or what you did. You say people have to really give credit to us. And that's what our movement's trying to do. We're trying to put a mirror up to the average citizen and say, why don't you start respecting you? This is you. You work for
It's amazingly delusional and Orwellian that they can hold these mutual. They hate the vaccine, but they love the father of the vaccine and the guy who bragged about it. And you look at the Kennedy and how he's talking about he wants to lock up people who are climate deniers, and then he doesn't ever really pull that back. He just instead he says, well, that wasn't what. Well, it was what he was saying. He gives you another lie. What I want to know, Shiva, is when you're going to do a shift at McDonald's. I mean. Now, that could really turn this around for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, David. They have to go to extremes. I mean, how much did he spend? He must have spent at least $2 to $3 million on the staging of that, the security, organizing that, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, or Kamala Harris, right? Either one of them. I mean, you look at my journey, David, or your journey. I grew up in New Jersey. I think I've been working since I was 12 years old. Some job, 14 full time. I've never stopped working. I worked, delivering donuts door to door, right? I worked doing landscaping as a child because my parents didn't have money. So I've worked all my life. But Trump has to act as though he's a McDonald's worker.
That's right.
And then you have these idiots saying, oh my God, he's one of us. And this is a delusion that our movement is exposing. We're putting a mirror up to people's face and saying, why do you respect these people? Why do you have a low value of yourself when you get up in the morning and you take care of your family? You have maybe $400 in your bank account. Why are you writing even $10 to these people? So our movement in many ways, David, is about people having dignity for themselves. So to save yourself.
And that's what I like. That's what I like about that, because I look at it, and as you point out, we're outsourcing our lives to these people. We're putting all of our hopes on these people. Well, if only Trump gets in, then he'll put in RFK Jr. and then they'll fix things so that doesn't happen again like it happened to my son. All of these different things, and yet, they won't take control of their life. And it is something that they've been trained to do. You look at the predictive programming of movies. I've talked about this before, how the CIA actually had a site where they said, hey, we got great ideas for scripts. If you're a writer, give it to, and they did. They had great ideas because it's kind of stuff they're going to pull off. But then what happens is we've always got one individual who is a savior, and he's going to save everybody. That was the most predictive programming of all of these things, because in every one of these nightmare scenarios that they're now trying to run on us, and every one of them, you had a one-man, a lone hero who's going to save us. Well, of course, that's going to have to be somebody who's really rich and powerful like Trump. So they fall for that, or like Elon Musk, they fall for that. Hook, line, and sinker. And that's really, I think, when you look at this delusion about this election, and everybody's got all their hopes pinned on it, I think it's really coming from that. And it really is sad. So I like what you're doing, because you're pivoting people to taking measures that they can do themselves, and to empower themselves, and not to make themselves dependent on these distant billionaires who don't care about it. I played the clip the other day of Michael Keaton, the actor. And of course, he was partisan in it, saying, Trump, he doesn't like you and all that. But none of them do. I mean, what he was saying was essentially true if you apply it to all of them. So they don't care anything about you. They're running their own life. And it was true. He was right about that. So that's what I like about what you're doing. You're using this mind control that we call a presidential election, and you're getting people's attention and saying, now you can do things on your own. And I think that's really
well, David, we have 5 people that I've educated, and they've taken it to file their own federal lawsuits. Here we have a guy who does alarm systems control, young kid, 27 years old, in Tennessee. When they took us off the ballot, he filed the lawsuit. He argued with a federal judge, and he's going to take it to the appellate court. A 70-plus-year-old woman, Rose C.S., who's a school teacher, she's doing that in New Jersey independently. We have a medical doctor in Utah doing that. We have a pizza store owner, Frank Marshall, in Wisconsin, who's doing that. So Trump tried to take us off the ballot in Wisconsin, and Kamala Harris took us off the ballot in New Jersey. But these are extraordinary people who come through, they've understood Shatter the Swarm. They've gone through training. They've collected signatures. They've mobilized people. And now they're learning how to file lawsuits without any lawyers, David. We didn't spend any money on any of this. Meanwhile, Booby Kennedy goes and raises $22 million. Trump and Kamala Harris are raising what, 15 billion?
Yeah.
The amount of money we're talking about is circulating money among the swarm, among themselves. Right. It's a racket. And this money is a wealth transfer from ordinary people who they hit with emails all day. But the savior mentality, David, I think I've talked about this from the context of Joseph Campbell's work. And this is where the real brainwashing goes. When you look at all ancient cultures, and it may even be in our deep psyche, spiritual psyche, of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Right. It's Joseph Campbell identified that in all great stories, that there was always this concept of a hero's journey, where someone, and it's really the journey of our own soul. It's not someone else, but they have stolen even the hero's journey. But the soul goes through this maturation process where you come into this world, you're presented with an opportunity to do something heroic. Initially, you don't want to do it. Then some great teacher comes, brings you to the point of wanting to go through life's tribulations. You go through that process. You then maybe suffer. You don't achieve your goals. And then you come out of that through a resurrection process, and you do something noble for humanity. This is a journey. Now, the story of Christ is a penultimate example of that, right? But the goal was each one of us was supposed to be our own heroes, in a sense, going through that journey. And it may be deeply in us that we're supposed to do that. But they even outsource that hero's journey back to them. So when Hollywood created the movies, we're being entertained. We're not doing the hero's journey ourselves. And so this is the deep manipulation that's taking place. They took Campbell's analysis. They took this deep, deep rooted concept in our own soul's journey, and they have outsourced that. So they're almost stealing your soul and outsourcing it. And you get to watch, not you having to do the work, but others having to do the work. So you vicariously live through them. And this is, they create a fake hero like Elon Musk. I mean, the guy's disgusting human being. Or a fake hero like Booby Kennedy, who tells you personal integrity is not that you can divorce him. So he can have 38 relationships with philander with women. His wife hangs herself, and he can justify it. So this is what's going on, David. They're taking this very powerful, deep-rooted essence of what it means to be human, which is you're supposed to go through that journey in your lifetime. You're supposed to stand up. You're supposed to show integrity. You're supposed to be the hero and say, oh,
everything is about to pacify people.
Right.
It's to isolate you and to set you in a virtual reality where you are a spectator about it. And they've been pretty upfront about that, where they want to go with the technocracy. And we got a real taste of that during the lockdown. No, you just stay where you are. And of course, you can communicate with other people if you want to through your Zoom or whatever. But that is it. They want to atomize us. They want to remove us from the real world, from real life. They will provide a reality for us, whether it's movies or whether it's games or some kind of virtual reality. They will provide the reality so that they can control everything that we do. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think this essence, David, of you not have, so one is they don't want you to take care of your health. They don't want you to take care of your physical, mental health. They don't want you to get educated, but the deepest issues, they don't want you to go through your own journey at a spiritual level, to understand your connection with your creator, to understand that you must go through this process. And
we're almost out of time, and I want to get, we got some comments here for you. Judy Wrinkle says, I'm writing Dr. Shiva in on my ballot. I did in the New Hampshire primary as well. S.A. Miller 123 says, I'm in Iowa. Dr. Shiva has my attention. I vowed not to vote, but he may just change my mind. Jason Barker, I would take Shiva over our two current choices. I can't vote this time around. Audi Modern Retro Radio says, finally, somebody is exposing that Elon Musk is not the self-made mogul. Musk is a government mascot. Like that. We always talked about him as the king of crony capitalism. About a decade ago, the LA Times called him the king of crony capitalism. Exactly. He's just like Zuckerberg. I agree. DG8, David, can you ask Dr. Shiva how it's legal for Trump to take money from Elon Musk after Musk has taken over $5 billion from China? Isn't that a threat to national security? And of course, that's part of the corruption that we have these political action committees where you've got one donor, right?
Yeah.
Elon Musk. Yeah. So that is amazing.
Well,
to
to
see
every
that.
one of your viewers listening, David, and everyone out there, understand that there is a growing group of people who are very intelligent, and they come from all different backgrounds, David. If you look at the quality of people and every Thursdays at 11 a.m. and 8 p.m., everyone's invited. It's a long day because we have people from Europe and Asia and people from the United States. You go to vashiva.com/orientation, sign up, because it's an opportunity for you not to feel alone. Because what happens, David, is as people raise their consciousness, they feel there's no one else around them. And the consciousness raising here is to understand that there's no one coming to save us. We have to take personal responsibility. And if we can move 3 to 5% of the people vibrating at that consciousness, David, it's over. It's like we don't need weapons at that point. Your
That's right.
conscious.
And we saw that in the lockdown. Everybody thought, well, I'm the only one that realizes that this is a fraud. No, it wasn't. They worked that very hard to keep people isolated. So that's a very important. And again, maybe the best site to go to is to shattertheswarm.com.
I would say, yeah. So for the campaign, go to shivaforpresident.com. You can get our cards, hand them out to get a real understanding where you want to start and really solve this for yourself. Go to shattertheswarm.com. If you really want to solve this problem, if you want to be on the path so you don't feel deluded and nihilistic, Shatter the Swarm gives you what the problem is. Then we've created a course, David, where people can actually get off the plantation free. Okay. And then people can connect with these global communities and then really become what we call a truth, freedom, health warrior scholar. They understand the physics, and then we get people on the ground talking to their neighbors. That's what this is about. No one is coming to save us. Save yourself.
Right. Well, Dr. Shiva is on the ballot in all but, you can write him in at the very least in all but 4 states. Some of the states you'll see him on the ballot. And of course, this is not going to be over with the election.
No way.
That's not the beginning and ending of life. It's going to continue to go on. And so you can go to shivaforpresident.com, VA Shiva, or you can go to Shatter the Swarm. We'll put all those in the link for the interview for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks you for
very
what
much,
you do.
David. Best to you and your family. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always a
Have
pleasure
a good day.
speaking with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
David.